Hello, everybody. This is Sue Frederick. Let's have a mystical conversation, the kind where we lose ourselves in the wonders of divine mysteries, share dreams from the other side, intuitive nudgings, and soul mission yearnings. A mystical conversation is what happens when we lift above our human mind, our ego mind, and review life from that place of divine inspiration. I'm Sue Frederick, and I'm the author of many books, including my newest book, Through a Divine Lens, and also another new book, Sacred Numerology Workbook, all available on Amazon and on my website, SueFrederick.com. But I am most excited today about my guest for this mystical conversation. He is extraordinary. His name is Jacob Cooper. He's the best-selling author of Life After Breath and the Wisdom of Jacob's Ladder. He's a sought-after speaker on grief, wisdom, and consciousness. He teaches meditation and mindfulness seminars to help others find purpose and overcome fears of life after death. He's a clinical social worker, Reiki master, and certified hypnotherapist, and he specializes in past life regression. And he uses his extensive personal and professional experience to empower all of the clients and patients that he sees in his work every day as a psychotherapist. So the most extraordinary thing, beautiful Jacob, that I want you to share with the listeners as we get started is this all started for you, this awakening in this life when you were only 3 years old. So tell us about that.
Yeah, well, Jacob will talk about the genesis, no pun intended, my own genesis. It's a different path. You're right. A lot of people wake up in their midlife or maybe the early 20s, but for me, I've always been this way, and I think we all have. I think just so many of us forgot. But at 1993, at just the young age of 3 years old, I had my NDE due to pertussis, otherwise known as whooping cough. And it was right before the Jewish high holiday. I come from a Jewish Orthodox background. The Jewish high holiday is called Yom Kippur. It was in the month of September, which is the day in which the soul is ready to greet itself to the Creator, a day of abundance, manifestation, and clearing off the year as well. But little did I know I was about to meet the Creator, but this went far beyond my own religious tradition. It was a direct experience with God, beyond my synagogue. I went to a playground with family, friends, and I climbed up to a ladder onto a slide. When with each rung that I was climbing, I began to just suffocate more and more. My breathing became more belabored, and at the top of the slide, everything shut down. I was purely suffocated. My body shut down and everything. And so I went outside of my body as if you're trying to start a car and the car's not working, not just going to hang out in a hot car, you're going to go outside of it, pop the engine, see what's going on. And that's kind of what I did. And I was able to see my body with a lot more awareness. And I felt my body just suffocated as if you're in a power breaker and you shut off one unit at a time, and there was nothing to hold on to. I guess the only thing was to do was to let go. And I let go after I felt my brain literally snap in half due to the deprivation of oxygen. And once, my brain snapped in half, as the saying goes, that's when God and the spirit realm came in, and I went on quite a familiar journey that we've all been on many times. And this was the journey to home. And this, NDE that I had, included but not limited to, I was aware of, spirit guides, angels, past lives, my soul's purpose. I was aware of my own soul family members. I had a understanding of God, Christ consciousness. It was just a full-blown mystical experience. But the most profound aspect of it as to why I'm here is the power of choice. Many near-death experiencers are either told it's not your time and you have more work to do, or you're given autonomy. And I was given autonomy to continue my life, as 3-year-old Jake and living that life out. But the reason why is I had premonitions of the work that I would do and the people that I would help, and just the understanding that the other side and heaven is always there, but the ability to bring that awareness into this reality allows us to not wait until we die until we have awareness, or that we don't have to die until we are able to see our true nature, that we could wake up from the dream in this reality too. And so um, with that decision, everything dissipated, and I woke up in a hospital bed with my mother accompanying me, and had the rest of my life to put the pieces of the puzzle together from that NDE.
I'm just so curious what it must have been like as a 3-year-old. I know it's hard to go back to the 3-year-old mind, but you're waking up in a hospital bed. Did you feel like you'd had a dream? Like, how did your mind interpret that experience back then?
I was more so met with a lot of rage, which to me is a trauma response. This was an incredibly traumatic event, but the anger was more so frustration that I knew what happened, but I wasn't able to articulate it to the people around me, and it was very frustrating. My father once came up to me recently and he said, one day, shortly after you had your NDE, he came up to me and said, "Hey, Dad, remember when I was rushed by the ambulance? Something happened on that day, but it's not going to make sense to you now, but one day it will." And, he told me that very matter of fact, when I was rushed to the hospital. So, the period of suffocation was the most challenging experience during my NDE, but that period lasted until I was able to really own my NDE and fill out the purpose of it, which was not to hold on to it, but to let it go. Much like when I survived, it was by letting go of suffocation and surrendering to the breath of eternity when my own physical breath was taken away.
I've heard you talk about how you saw past lifetimes during that experience. Is that correct? Am I getting that right? And that you
Yes.
understood that you had perhaps taken your own life in a previous life and that there was a parallel to the suffocation feeling you were having? Am I getting this right? Tell me how it went for you when you understood
Yeah.
the parallel there.
First of all, as mental health, someone in the mental health field, I really love your work because, I mean, your wording of that, because there's, people say complete with that, and you don't complete a heart attack, you don't complete, cancer. You don't commit, I'm sorry, you don't commit a heart attack, you don't commit cancer.
Right.
So the decriminalization of suicide is very significant. But yes, in my last lifetime, that did happen, and there's a lot of allegory and symbolism with my NDE. I have had since then, before getting public, a lot of intuitives have been able to tap into what exactly I saw in my last lifetime. And this was an image that didn't stop itself in my NDE. I would have frequent dreams of it, and I would just be walking around, and those images of that last lifetime would be present. But I believe from completion would begin, and there's lessons involved, and from other lifetimes, they infiltrate itself in different ways in the current lifetime. But for myself, it was learning how to let go of feeling as if my back was against the wall and there was no hope, there was no way out, and the power of surrender that saved my life. So letting go of my own suffocation of the physical body to surrender to the breath of eternity. And
That
that's
is
why I'm
so
here.
beautifully said. Oh my God, Jacob. You're a gorgeous writer too. I mean, anybody who's listening, if you haven't read his books, you have to read his books. He's a beautiful writer and they're all on Amazon. And
Right.
again, The Wisdom of Jacob's Ladder and what's the other one? The other one is
Life After Breath is my
Life After
first,
Breath, right, which I love. So
which,
great. That's
well,
such
really, you look at Life After Breath, Dr. Raymond Moody is on the book, who coined the term NDE in the mid 70s, but Life After Breath, in a way, is an ode and a homage to life after life.
yeah.
It's kind of like a spin-off, but in a way, it's different. It's not a kind of like a research kind of, it's my own memoir of my NDE. But Life After Breath really speaks to the fact that my own breath was taken away and there's continuity of it. But to me, there's one eternal breath, and that's the breath of eternity. In my own faith in Judaism, the word for spirit, it translates to ruach in Hebrew language, which means the breath of God or the wind of God. And so we're all created by the breath of God. And so when we pass away, the physically, our breath is taken from us, but then we're restored with the breath of eternity. And, that's what happened to myself.
That's so beautiful.
Uh,
And, I think it's so important. that people hear your story, because I work, and you do too, I'm sure, with many people who've lost a loved one who took their own life. And the first thing they have to deal with is the horrible, negative way that society looks at that, and also that religion looks at that. So many of the moms I've worked with would tell me, I was very involved in a very Christian church, and then my child intentionally crossed early, and they went to church, and the minister told them that their child was condemned for that. And the Catholic Church says that as well, which is just horrifying to me. So I always love talking about that choice point moment that you're talking about. You were held by spirit and guides and angels and shown the choices you could make. And isn't it true that you were told that either choice was okay, that your soul could decide? Is that correct?
Absolutely. There was autonomy. But I first want to preface that I think a lot of people's depiction of God is really a projection of their own childhood or their principles or toxic parents. And it's not a white man with a beard with a stick, condemning people. The essence of God, to me is a vibration, and that vibration is pure love, pure unconditional love, and where all of life emanates and flows from. And the only thing that is real is love. Love is all that there is, ever was, as simple as can be. And what kind of unconditional God would condemn its creation, but also, someone who's clearly, in those situations in an immense amount of pain. That's the last thing that you would want. So if that is God, I think you may have to self-reflect on a limited versus unlimited conditional God.
I love that you say that, because I'm an ordained Unity minister. And the reason I chose that path was I grew up Catholic and studied Theosophy and Native American spirituality, Buddhism, I was deeply immersed in Hinduism in an ashram. And I love so many pieces of all of those traditions. Their meditation is incredible, in my opinion, their chanting. But I kept pressing to understand God through all of those different eyes and all of those different paths. And when I heard the principle that is the core of unity is that there is one force that runs this universe, and it is the all good, all God, loving consciousness that runs through the universe, creates everything, and runs through all of us. A loving consciousness, and that is God, and we are part of it. I suddenly knew in every cell in my body that that was right, or at least for me, that was exactly true. And that I wanted to align with that awareness now, especially in today's world when we're going through so much struggle. And as you talk about that understanding of God, I think I remember reading in your book that you really had a hard time when you then, after your NDE, you would be in school or in synagogue, and you'd be being taught about this very different God from the God consciousness that you'd experienced. How did you make peace with that?
It took a while, and I still, to some degree, struggle with it. But I think it's kind of like grade school, with understanding God. You have, people who, on a soul level, tend to buy into more the organizational, religious level, and I think, younger spirits tend to need that degree of structure. But I find older spirits, they don't need the outer God. They're connected, and I think everyone can to a degree. But it's a younger soul thing. I can't describe it any way else, and there's a lot of amnesia, sadly. But it's not to condemn that. I think to a degree it's helpful, but it's also could be very limiting and contribute to a great deal of neurosis, OCD, anxiety. It's things that I still have today because everything is just had to, in my tradition, everything had to be separate. There's a million different rules. The Sabbath ended 7:03, not 7:04. And it's like I was following this. I'm like, I'm gonna be stricken by lightning if I'm 30 seconds late to this stuff. So
Oh my
it,
God.
it, it it never made sense, the neuroticism to it.
Yeah.
And I just saw how it was affecting myself psychologically. And it's just like, this is not working. This method is just causing an undue deal of distress. And it's not something that is reflective of my heart. And I bless people if they want to go that path. I think great. There's great mysticism within every religion. I think that's the goal. But the issue is the hijacking of um, just dogmatic principles, in politics and government that get in the way of, the true mysticism and essence of, a lot of the faiths and paths up to the mountain.
That's so beautifully said. And I'm wondering how you then chose as you got older and you had these two worlds you were very aware of as you were growing up, one being the ordinary world with family and school, and the other being the mystical world.
Mm.
And how did you decide, or when in the journey did you say, I need to be a healer? I need to take what I know in my heart and turn around and offer that and make that how I make my living.
Well, I mean, I think, the one piece was, I think pain is a great opener of purpose. And certainly having an NDE, I had the most pain, in that, but that was an opener to purpose. It's not the only way, but one day I was kicked out of my home for, I guess having like a bad mouth, and I went into it was a bad dispute that I had, and looking back on it, I was no angel, certainly, but I was kicked out of my home for a couple of days, and when I found out that I was kicked out of my house, I subconsciously wasn't even thinking about it. I just walked around the corner of my home, and I was back into a school, and I looked around me. I'm like, oh my God, here I am in a playground. And it just kind of dawned on me the parallels of the playground that I was in when I had my NDE, and now I was back in it. And I think to me, home was just being a child in God's playground, the allegory of that. And I had my NDE. And then a day or two later, I attended a yoga seminar, and I was still, feeling low. And this woman, just with kind of like spiky short hair, just kind of like, I don't know, that kind of biker kind of look, just came up to me, and I'm just like, who is this person? And she's just started talking to me. I'm like, I was just there for my yoga seminar. I don't want to really be bothered. Normally, I put my walls up. I'm like a pretty big introvert. And she just says, I see you speaking in front of a crowd one day. You're going to be a very well-known healer. I see you speaking in front of an auditorium, and I see rows of people. You'll see it's going to happen. And that was validation to me that from the pieces of my premonition of my NDE, that others saw it. So, that put me on the path to a degree. But there's many things. It's hard to put to one point, but I have to credit that woman for being a real earth angel, reminding me of who I am and why I'm here.
Well, I also want to throw in some interesting stuff I discovered because I do numerology, as you know, and so I looked at your path, and you are the Taurus 1111 Master Soul, and many of my followers who are into my way of doing numerology know that I always teach there's 3 different ways to add the birth date, and you have to add it all 3 ways to see if the Master Soul number shows up once or twice or 3 times. If it shows up 3 times, as it did for you, it means the soul said, Jacob, no way out of this life. You are going to wake up in this life and be an angel and a healer and really make a difference. There's no way out, so to speak. But then you grounded it in Taurus, which is almost the opposite energy. And that's what I love about listening to you talk, because here you are, this brilliant mystical philosopher and healer and brilliant writer, and you've had out-of-body experiences more than once, and we'll talk about that later. And yet, as you talk about it, it's so practical and down to earth and manageable and not scary or anything, or not even emotional, just very everyday logic. And that's the Taurus in you that needs to make it be that way. And then the 1111 is hypersensitive, hyper intuitive. You say you're an introvert, I know that you're just a very sensitive, intuitive, angelic being.
But yeah, well, selective. But it's funny that Taurus gets a bad rap many times because I think like in pop psychology, it's like you're just supposed to sit on your behind and eat all day and not have a personality and be very flat and just kind of like explode, here and there. But I look at, some of the greatest spiritual teachers of our time, from Wayne Dyer, my birthday twin, Shirley MacLaine, so we've seen a lot in Sigmund Freud for psychology was a Taurus, and Billy Joel, the great singer, was a Taurus, is a Taurus too. So
Well, I'm not
it's
saying it's a bad thing.
no, 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 no,
I
not
love
at
my
all. Not at
Tauruses.
all. What I'm saying is a lot it's an honor to be a part of that club, but a lot of the great spiritual teachers, are born under the Taurian sign. And I think that's for a reason because we're very grounded. We bring it down to earth. We're relatable. We could be in two worlds very easily.
That's it.
But I think Taurus is the most grounded of the earth signs to
Yes.
me.
And
Um,
it is, and that's why it's so perfect what you set up, because I believe our soul picks the path and chooses the moment of entry and exit of the lifetime.
right,
So your soul said, all right, Jacob, you're going to go in there and that really have this angelic, mystical awakening and great healing work to do in the world. So let's make sure that you're very strong and grounded and able to bring it down to the world in a very understandable,
yeah,
user-friendly, practical way.
yeah.
So we're going to give you these two opposite energies to balance in this lifetime. And look at you, you're doing amazing.
Well, thank you, thank you. I think the greatest trait of a Taurus is normally I find is loyalty, as well as authenticity.
Yeah,
And that's what sticks because two people could be saying the same exact words, but if there's incongruence with those words, they're not going to really listen. So I think the significant piece is integrity and authenticity and just being relatable and real. That's significant. Because a lot of these spiritual teachings, they're just kind of like cooking spinach. It's just so much, but when you reduce it, it's like what could I practically get from this? It
right.
sounds really good, but when you leave those seminars, you're like, all right, so how does that translate? How could you have spirituality with practicality?
Well, now
That's
you're
the
talking
important.
my Virgo talk because I'm a
Yeah,
Virgo, and
I understand.
and
Yeah,
I've asked of every path and every teacher I've studied, how does this
mm,
apply to
right.
everyday life for everyday people? Because
Mm,
if we're here on earth, that's what we have to figure out. That's what we've got to master while we're
mm,
here. And us good earth signs, Virgo and Taurus, we're all about that. We're all about getting it out of the esoteric and bringing it to the everyday.
yeah.
So, do you help your clients? You have a practice as a psychotherapist. Tell me about your work with clients and even how you help them be grounded here in this physical world.
Well, I must have had a past life as a monk because a part of me would rather almost live in a monastery. And I wanted to do that for a bit of time. My mother would go crazy because I wanted to live in India for, early of my kind of college years. And that wasn't allowed. But to me, being a therapist is the closest thing to being a monk.
Oh,
By that I mean, you are practicing mindfulness, you're connecting to empathy, you're present with the patients, you learn patience, and you just kind of learn to stay connected to the moment, to wherever the client's at and meeting them where they're at, not necessarily where you're at. So to me, I view my work as just living in an ashram, just in a different way. But in a way where it's not just kind of like about ascending and self-servicing, it's about the service of others, which to me is the closest thing to God. I think a lot of people try to find God, but to me it's about embodiment of God, which is of service. That's what it's all about. Yeah.
God, I love that. I love every word you're saying here. You're definitely my long lost brother, I think.
New York brother. Yeah, yeah.
Yes, New York.
East Coast, West Coast. Yeah.
But what you're saying is so right about being a monk. And it's even making me think about my work and why I love it, because I get to focus on another person's pain and journey of awakening
Mm,
all day long. and it is sacred, holy work for me as well. So I totally understand what you're saying, how blessed we are to get to live these I consider myself a nun. I grew up Catholic. I was sure I was going to become a nun.
That's funny. Yeah, how we
Yeah.
and and it's like you could take some of that into this. It doesn't have to be full blown, but you could use it like again for practical use. That's a Virgo and the Taurus in us. Like how could I take that what I want and just maybe change it like a different degree?
That's
And
exactly right.
it's profound. But to me, all of this life in a way is a training to be a guide on the other side too,
Yeah.
for many souls who are more advanced. And I think part of that is really being able to understand others, to accept others unconditionally, which, is a crux of our work. But, really it's just about being that angel, that guide to people here, in this life, and then we go there, we'll be in uniform with who we were here. I think a lot of people think when you cross over, you just turn into an angel. I think you see angels, but you evolve not evolve, but you come back into your own being and have a fuller expression of that divine spark within, with hopefully each lifetime.
You wrote the most beautiful stuff. And I read both of your books, and I'm trying to remember. I think this is from The Wisdom of Jacob's Ladder,
Right.
where you wrote, hell is a separation and difficulty in accepting one's actions, and a state of limbo and dance between living in darkness instead of letting it go and entering the light. Do you want to talk more about the idea and the concept of hell as a separation and a difficulty in accepting one's actions? I think that's fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, I'll give a reference to my NDE. Like, I was holding on to suffering, and I wasn't letting it go. And sometimes, as you say, the devil that we know is what we kind of go to. But it's about reframing some of our cultural myth. Our cultural myth is the more that we hold on to, the more that we have. And really, to me, heaven is about letting go. The more that we let go, the more energy will grow. So spirituality and the other side is maybe a different dichotomy than what we're used to, where we just hold on and we have possessive and attachment. And you could call that the ego. And to me, when you're very much in the ego, that's a state of separation, which you could call it hell. I think that's a word, but uh, that's that to me, it's just separate from the essence and deprivation of our, um, connection to our eternity. Um,
I think the word separation is so important, and I would even extend that hell is a separation of feeling that we are separate from other people as well.
that's right.
As we look around the world right now and see what the problems are, so much of it is about people thinking they're separate from each other. And so they have to behave in a certain kind of way to get ahead of the other person, or to keep the other person in their place, or take more than their share of whatever because they're separate. When you crossed over in your NDE and later in other out of body experiences you've had, would you say that you understood the collective that humanity is in a profound way when those things happen? Or would you talk about that more?
Yeah, I mean, direct experiences could transform intellectual awareness to a clear experiential reality. And I mean, for myself, briefly, I had an OBE, my first year of college, community college that I attended. And for several weeks, I just woke up and I was out of my body. I think looking back in it, I would attribute many things I was doing, yoga practice, stuff like that. But plenty of people do yoga practice and don't have OBs for several weeks. I just think it was, to me, looking back in it, I think the divine wanted me to really believe all this stuff because I'm my own biggest skeptic and I just push things away. And this kind of gave me full blown belief system that, whoa, this ND wasn't something farce, it was real. And this gave me even more confidence that all this stuff, is real. But it to me, I think it was started because I just started laughing hysterically for an extended period of time. And this wasn't a manic phase. I know what that is. This was laughing where every part of my body was just being squeezed out. and every bit of tension or sadness or anxiety that I had was just kind of like a wet towel of all of the stuff that I accumulated in this life. And I looked at a lot of things that I just bought into, what should we call cultural myths. And I looked at it and I just laughed hysterically. Of all these things that we take so seriously are absolutely nothing at the end of the day. And, I just kind of like let go of all those attachments to those concepts and those things that I was taught. And I
Mhm.
looked at it straight in the eye and I just laughed hysterically, and my energy just exploded for several weeks, which led to myself being able to really see the one strand of energy that we are all connected to, not just humans, but this earth, this planet, the animals, it's all just one strand. And I was able to see that through my own third eye, which was exploding during this time. For several weeks during this OB, I had a third eye and I felt it here and there, but this was an actual massive eyeball that was slowly blinking on and off. And it was just kind of like annoying sometimes because I'd take like a tissue and I'd just wipe up my forehead thinking that it was sweating, but it was this wet eyeball literally blinking on and off of my forehead. It wasn't like a small little, it was an actual eyeball that I felt just blinking on and off. And I had a lot of premonitions during this time. Everything was just fully activated, and it was, I would say, one of the greatest couple weeks of my life, but also to my human side, a little bit confusing too. It was a roller coaster.
Well, you were in college, which means you had to get your homework done too.
You know what? I finished with all A's and I had an OBE, for
Well,
several weeks. But I started my college career at the lowest possible level of reading and writing. And I
mm,
had a Virgo aunt during my first or second semester who was one of my spirit guides. She was a late August Virgo, and she actually was a teacher for the blind for Jose Feliciano. So she taught the blind, but that was an allegory for her life because she taught people who couldn't see things, or she taught people to really see the unseen forces. And she was into all this stuff, the metaphysical stuff. And she was like my first big teacher to get me back on this path. But she looked at my writing. She says, "You're an incredible writer." I'm like, pass over that joint. I want it because I don't see that. But again, she was able to see the unseen. And that's the work that she did as a teacher for the blind, the visually impaired, rather. Uh, so I think, yeah, it's so significant that people understand that there could possibly be angels, not just over there, but earth angels here, who remind us of who we are and the infinite power within ourselves. And she was someone who totally did that for me.
do you believe that we have people that are in our life that are going to step forward right at the moment that we need them to, and that it's a prearranged soul agreement of some kind, like your aunt telling you that?
Well, without question. I mean, when people have significant roles, it's all, predetermined, I think. Significant moments, significant roles are all within the playing. So yes, that was certainly orchestrated. And, you couldn't ask for a better teacher in many ways. How could you script that? It's like someone who worked with the blind and then just live that in the metaphysical sense.
Mhm.
So absolutely. And actually, I'm looking at her picture right now as I speak. So, she's certainly an angel. But I mean, she left me with her last message about soul families, which I always kind of studied. She would give me books to read, Sylvia Brown books and all that kind of stuff. And I'd have to report to her every week because she saw something in me. She didn't do this with anyone else but me.
Wow.
Uh, she was, and we come from the religious background, so it was kind of like an underground hangout that we had to kind of get away from it all. It's just kind of underground secret conversations. Now it's more embraced, but she was about to go. She had was what's called lucid visions and stuff like that, deathbed visions. And she kept on saying, if you look at a picture of a family, they may have different characteristics, but if you look at the eyes, which are the windows to who we are, there's something similar uniting everyone. And I thought it's a nice message, nothing of it. But then, a year or two later, I was being read by an evidential medium, and she brought forward my aunt with evidence after evidence. And then she said, "Why is she talking about pictures? What's the message?" And I knew it was validation of the soul family and the interconnectedness that goes far beyond this lifetime. Yeah.
That's so beautiful. You know, tomorrow is the 43rd anniversary of my great soul awakening when
Wow.
my beautiful husband, Paul Frederick, died in my arms
Mm,
when I was 29.
mm,
And it's just amazing how time and space are not linear, because I do know that Paul is probably my greatest teacher, and he comes back again and again to make sure I'm getting things right and understanding them. And and
yeah.
this weekend, I was having a weekend of feeling very sensitive and kind of emotional for no reason that I could understand, and also feeling like, gee, my work, I haven't done enough good work in the world. I was just in this kind of spiral that can happen sometimes.
Sure.
And Paul and I had a sign that was the first gift he ever gave me, of a crescent moon with a star in the middle. And he gave it to me as a necklace. And he said, I'm the moon and you're the star. And then when he died, we were having an outdoor celebration of life,
Mm,
and a friend nudged me to look at the sky, and it was that symbol, the crescent moon with the planet Jupiter in the middle. So this weekend I'm out shopping with my husband, and I'm talking about, I don't know why I'm so emotionally oversensitive. We walk into a store and there's the sign from Paul. It's huge. It's metallic sculpture of this crescent moon, golden crescent moon with this huge star in the middle. And it knocked me over. It was so powerful.
wow. Wow.
And I got the message so quickly. I was like, it just brought tears to my eyes. And I could feel Paul saying, come on, you're doing fine. Just, get over all those emotions. Don't worry. Everything's going to be fine. And just reminding me that he's still with me and everything is well. And I keep talking to parents who have lost children, and their children go out of their way to bring those parents incredible signs like that just when they need them most. And I'm just wondering, in your experience, who do you feel connects with you that way most from the other side? Is it your aunt, or are there other people there too?
Yeah, no, I connect with a lot. I've had one of my best friends a year or two ago completed suicide, and that was one of the most difficult moments of my life, but also a big impetus to finish my book, you know. So
Mhm.
he comes through a lot. My grandfather is around, my aunt is around, but that's a beautiful story and just speaks to the evidence of eternity that, I read a lot of Dr. Gary Schwartz. It seems like every single one of my colleague and friend is in the Arizona area. He's in Tucson,
Yeah.
but he writes a lot about the probability of these super synchronicities, and it's like 0.000, so for this to happen at this place at this time, there's no like it's impossible
Yes.
statistically for these things to happen. And
Mhm.
I mean, the biggest sign that I ever got was my grandmother passed away Memorial Day last year, and I found out we were having a Shabbat meal at my parents' house, and I go there Friday nights here and there, and then I go into the car, I turn on, I found out for fortunate passing, I turn on my car, open Spotify, and then Spotify says Grandma's home. It's never
Oh.
happened to me ever before, so it just like floored me, and I was just like, okay, I hear you loud and
Oh my
clear.
God, that's so
You know,
great. That is,
Spotify, yeah, it's just I had the picture of it. It's at grandma's home.
God,
You
I
can't
love
beat
that.
that.
You
Never
can't
happened
beat
to me.
that.
Never happened to me once, never happened to me since. Uh,
Oh
so
my
stuff
God.
like these kind of things, I think what's important is to just be aware of it and ask for it,
Yes. Ask for
and
it.
know that like they are reading our thoughts. They know exactly what's going on. They're tuned in. And this work is rewarding, but I think there's a double-edged sword phenomenon with, the social media component and the YouTube component where it's almost kind of like, who's got more followers, who does this, who does that, and it's just almost kind of like capitalism of spirituality. It's like
Right.
for the very like 1% who dominate this stuff, and then the average person is just trying to get their message across. But it's just really, I've found it's really about the work. It's not about the results. It's not about the numbers. It's about the process and just being about the work and integrity. Um, Yeah, and it's if you can help one person, you help to change, the lives. But I think a lot of people get deflated because of comparisons with, these kind of influential, big, and they do great work too. But it's just,
You
everyone has a different role in it. No one's bigger or better. It's all significant,
You're exactly right about that. And, this was my 11th book that just came out through a divine lens.
11 book,
11th
number
book.
11. Yeah,
And and I had gotten attached to the idea that this would be the book that was, the big bestseller.
right.
And what I've come to learn, just like you're saying, is there has to be a constant focus just on the doing the good work in the
That's
world,
it.
and let the
That's it.
universe take it where it's going to take it and where it's meant to be. And that's what Paul was really telling me this weekend. I knew
Right.
that's what he was saying. He was like, quit beating yourself up. Everything is fine. You're doing exactly what you're supposed to be doing. And it really just shifted me back into my right perspective,
Right.
and that book will find the people who it can help. And there's no question in my mind about that, because to me, it's the most helpful book I've ever written. So I know that the angels and the guides will get it into the hands of whoever needs it. So what is your next book, Jacob?
I don't know. That's the hard part is I'm 33 years old and I've written 2 books, which, is
Pretty
is a
amazing.
lot, is a lot, but now I'm like, oh God, I have the rest of my life and I can't just finish at 2 books. Like that puts pressure on me, and you inspire me with 11 books. And I really do want to write another one. It just hasn't come to me yet. Um, but I think it's, kind of like a little bit of a book about how to live in a mindful way, in a way, how to be present in the present, how to maximize this reality. So kind of like a Zen mindfulness book, I think is on my radar, but I really do want to serve, and however the universe wants me to, that's what they will. If they want me to stay quiet for a little bit. But I find, these books just kind of come through me.
Yes, they do.
I surrender it and I just kind of ask universe, like, how could I be of service? Um, do I have the finances to afford, all the fancy schmancy this? No, I just do the best I can with what I have, and that's all we can do. And I've gotten great feedback, so that's, good,
Jacob, you're doing so great at 33.
Yeah.
This is amazing what you've accomplished and what you're already teaching. In the next few decades, you are going to be out in the world in a bigger and bigger way because you're so needed and your message is so needed here.
All right.
And
Well, thank you.
the next book will bubble up inside of you when the time is right.
But it will come. Now is just kind of resting. It's the interesting part about life is, we know the ending, that there is no ending. We're just uncertain about what's around the corner, and that's okay. We cannot fail. As long as we're being true to ourselves, how could we fail? And so I think it's about being authentic, trusting that no matter what, there is no ending, and it's neither good nor bad. These are just experiences of the soul, and just maximize our time here because our afterlife is very much reflective of this life, and what we do here in this life is reflect. And I say this in every single segment, but it's so true. Like I was watching Dr. Wayne Dyer and the Taurus that I mentioned, and someone asked him like, "What's spiritually about? What's God it's about?" And he in the Shift documentary, and he said, God is really about enthusiasm. And they asked him like, "What does that mean?" And he says, enthusiasm comes from the Greek word entheos, which means the inner God within. And so when you find the things that you love and are passionate about, that's the connectivity to divinity. That is the divine. That's where divine dwells. So I think for each person to find their path, it's not 1,000 miles away. It's, following your heart's desires and what, keeps you going here. That's divine.
And doing our good work day by day and just keeping our focus on that. And
Right.
that's what you're doing. And it's just so beautiful to see. Is there anything else you want to say to the listeners before we wrap up?
No, I just hope that this was a gentle reminder, of the expansiveness and the eternity of the soul, and to embrace the good and the bad. I think in our society we're very trendy. When we see something challenging, we tend to move away from it or just kind of avoid it or bypass it. And I think pain for myself and many of my clients has been a great opener of purpose and transformation. But it's about surrendering to that eye of the hurricane and finding that piece of clarity within the storm, you know.
Beautiful. Thank you, Jacob. It has been an absolute blessing. This
Likewise.
is again Jacob Cooper, the author of, oh, Jacob, what is your website? Tell the listeners.
So yeah, so people could find me through, groups or individual services through jacobLcooper.com. I'll be in Lilydale August 8th if anyone is interested in the world's largest spiritualism center, at least in the United States, definitely. And I also have a YouTube platform, which I know you'll be on, and it's also on Spotify, iTunes, called The Wisdom Jacob's Ladder. We bring on a lot of influential thought, leaders, artists, creative minds, and people with passions on as guests, to our channel. So no, we're excited to have you on to discuss the thing closest to your desire too. So this is going to be fun to have your viewers, see you, also in another,
Yeah.
on the other side is getting interviewed. So yeah.
That's so cool. And remember, listeners, his books are Life After Breath and The Wisdom of Jacob's Ladder. And he's a phenomenal writer. You'll just love reading his work. So on that note, thank you so much, Jacob. It's been such a pleasure. You're definitely my brother here, and I'm so grateful to connect with you again in this lifetime. So many, many blessings to you. And until we meet again, thank you so much.
An honor, Sue. Thank you.
Thank you.